to order the Town of Atherton Planning Commission meeting for March the 25th, 2015. Roll call, please.
Thank you. Commissioner Grinley?
Here.
Commissioner Tonelli?
Present.
Commissioner Whitmer? Here. Chair Lively?
Here.
Commissioner Lane?
We have a quorum?
Here.
We have a quorum. Next item on our agenda is public comments. Anyone in the audience would like to comment on anything that's not on our agenda this evening? There being none, we'll move to the approval of minutes.
There's a correction to the minutes on, we need page numbers. We'll add some page numbers to the minutes, but on the last page as well, under the special events ordinance, the motion should have been to continue to the next meeting and not to approve.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else?
Good try, Lisa.
Anyone else? Any further corrections? If not, is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
Move the approval as amended.
Second.
Mary Beth seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye. That's right.
The next item is public hearings. The first item on our agenda is consideration of ordinance of the special events ordinance. Staff report.
I don't have anything to add to the staff report. We did discuss this item at two different meetings. It was directed from the City Council for your consideration to amend the special events ordinance. And I think that you had asked at your last meeting to have the city manager in attendance as well as Lieutenant Wade. And I appreciate both of them for taking the time out of their schedules to be at this meeting. And they can both give you their professional experience as to what the issues are in the town that really should be regulated by this and what changes they feel need to be adjusted. So if you want to maybe turn it over, I don't know if you're here to answer questions.
Here to answer any questions.
Okay, maybe.
Well, why don't we open the public hearing?
Sure.
And you take it from there, Mr. City Manager.
Sure. Well, the ordinance, as you got in your staff report, doesn't change a whole lot. And then really our presentation to the council was to tighten up some of the loopholes that were out there in the existing ordinance to make sure that if you're gonna have a special event on your property and it impacts public works or public safety in any way beyond normal operations, you as the property owner should be obligated to repay those costs of response via public safety or public works. The old ordinance had if the event was over the course of 2 days, that triggered it, or if it, mainly that was it. And so the change was to make it, didn't matter whether it was 2 days or 5 days, if it was 1 day and it triggered a response by our public safety department or our public works department that was beyond normal response, you should be obligated to pay those costs as a property owner. And as Joe and I were talking about it today, some of the examples might be, you've got a wedding occurring on your property or a fundraiser event occurring on your property, and you're going to valet park cars along the public street. Let's say there's 50 cars that you're going to have come to your event. You're parking them all legally, yet there's complaints from neighbors about parking issues and concerns related thereto. So the police go out and they talk to the valet service and say, hey, you need to do this or could you do that? That's not a problem. That's not a special event permit. You're not triggering any issues. But if our officers have to go out there and start directing traffic, or our officers have to go out on multiple occasions in response to your event's causing an impact on the neighboring community. The ordinance is designed in a way to make you as the property owner responsible for those costs that the town's incurring so that everybody else isn't footing the bill for your response. That's basically the corrections or loophole changes. And then we've improved the non-school event activities on school or country club property to clear that up, to make sure that they're complying with the noise ordinance, that lights are downlit and things like that. Events on school property, even non-school events, don't trigger the special event ordinance unless they violate the standards that the town has imposed. Hours of operation, lights impacting neighboring property, noise beyond the normal hours of operation. That's pretty much it.
William?
Two questions. It often occurred to me that many of my fellow residents have no clue they have to have a permit.
Yep.
How well advertised is that fact? Second question. The issue about schools related special events is my understanding that we have no jurisdiction over the public schools, and they can do pretty well what they want to.
Yes and no.
To the point.
So the first one, in terms of advertising, you're absolutely right. We encountered this a couple of years ago, and it hit the paper when the president had a fundraiser activity in town, and it occurred at a property here. It entailed a lot of public safety involvement by the town, $8,000 worth of activity from the town, both from Public Works and PD. And we weren't reimbursed for those costs by those property owners who hosted those private events on their property. Now, I think those were single day events.
Yes, correct.
So even under the current ordinance, it wouldn't have triggered a special event requirement. If it had hit the 2-day mark, it would have, and residents are not aware of it. So we started that advertising campaign about a year and a half, 2 years ago, saying, if you're gonna have these events, you need to be aware that you could be responsible for costs that the town incurs in relation to your event. The second one is school activity. The school events, school-related events on school property, we don't regulate. That's totally up to the school. But a non-school related event on school property, we can regulate.
Nuance that for me. I'll give you an example. The Menlo Atherton High School non-school event. Do you have any jurisdiction there?
Yeah, if it impacts our noise or parking or surrounding area, yes, we do.
That's interesting. Because on the campus itself, we have no jurisdiction.
Only if it's educational purposes, they're exempt. If they have any kind of commercial activity, like a cell tower, we require a conditional use permit. If they're renting out their facilities and it's a non-school classroom purpose, then yes, we can regulate that.
Thank you.
Would that include like Pee Wee football?
Well,
Just
there,
for
That's the
example.
there's also a law that they're required to make their facilities generally available to the public as well for these types of events. So we've looked at, how do you regulate Pee Wee and, but we can. Yes.
But they fall under the noise ordinance and parking
Correct.
things, so if all of a sudden they're parking cars in the middle of the street, then we're fully in jurisdiction.
Right.
Mhm.
So, and if their valleys get in the way of the Pee Wee football thing, then we have another there, right?
Exactly.
Well, a question, let's assume there's an estate sale, somewhere in Atherton that runs for a couple of 3 days. Would that need a special events permit?
Well, there's, estate sales also fall under the sign ordinance, so there's some concerns there with where they would put signage throughout the town that the town's recently updated. But yeah, if there's an event, public's invited, multi-days, yes. Single day, under the new provisions.
Any further questions?
I had a
Go
quick
ahead.
question. All right, so,
But again, I'm sorry, only if they require public safety or public works response beyond normal.
So the trigger for this update was the concern I had. So frankly, I was embarrassed that we would send a message from this town that the president wasn't welcome, right? And the fact that we tried to charge the president for the acts basically that were our own town generated. So the mechanism that triggered this is really annoying to me from a number of different levels. So if we were trying to build a residence, I totally get it. But to be in a community where people spend that much on a couple bottle of wines, it sort of really was annoying to me, and I was embarrassed. And I almost paid for the $8,000 myself. So if we're doing this from the standpoint that you're describing right here, and it works this way, and it's focused on the residents, and whatever the residents do or don't do, I'm fine with it. But to the degree that it goes beyond that at any point, then I would have a real problem with it. So if we can be assured that it'll be approached that way, I'm fine with it. It just what triggered this was the wrong trigger for me.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and the ordinance is directed at the property owner.
Okay, good.
I live in Lower Atherton, on the border of Menlo Park, and it runs in my backyard.
They do a lot of construction on your street, I think.
Yes, you've heard from me, right? And the Nativity School is my neighbor, and we are great neighbors. We just love each other. And they have their annual gala in second weekend in June. Now, I have no problem with that. I've lived with it for 43 years. My next door neighbors have really big problems with it, and the cars do park on the Atherton side of that lower Atherton street. But, you know, do we have any, you ever had any problems with that? Because they park on the Laurel, they park on the Menlo Park side too, but.
Not on the Atherton side, but we will typically refer calls to Menlo Park
Okay.
or the Menlo Park side for people parking in front of the church or at the church, and it's generally been students or people going to events where they couldn't find parking at the high school.
Okay.
That happens down in Cena too, where I live. So half of it's unincorporated, and our side is the Atherton side. And, you know, we can always tell Good Friday and Easter, and you know, it's yeah,
It's
so,
busy.
yeah, and periodically it gets to be, you know, people get their mailbox knocked over because somebody backs their truck into it because they're trying to do a U-turn, and so, but it's gotten better, the church has gotten better about that, but it is a very common thing to have happen.
Anyone else?
Yes. This seems to update the school event guidelines
Yes.
and it extends the hours of field use.
The one change it makes is from 8 AM, it used to be from 8 AM to 7 PM, and Monday through Friday, now it's 8 AM to 8 PM, Monday through Friday.
You think that'll stir up a hornet's nest?
It will. Well, one of the things that happened several years ago, how many years ago, William? Quite a few. William and I toured around and talked to all the schools about the end date, whether it was 7 o'clock or 6:30 or so forth. And remembering that sunset's a pretty good time to close the field use down, we ended up with sunset, because in the wintertime, sunset somewhere around 4:30 or 4:45. In the wintertime, it's 8:25 or thereabouts. So we came to the conclusion at that point that the end date for field and sports events ought to be 8 o'clock in the morning on weekdays till sunset.
Mhm.
And that would be a suggestion that I would like to see included in this revision.
Well, that's certainly something the commission can recommend in terms of a change. Remember, the 8 PM includes setup, takedown, and those sorts of activities as well.
So that means essentially for most events it would be around 7:30 at the latest.
Correct.
But sunset's a good rule because you start to get into safety issues after that.
The only thing about that is that makes it a variable, that everybody's gonna be, and everybody's going, okay, so what was the thing today, was 8:27, and yesterday was 8:24, and.
You read the paper every morning.
Yeah.
And this doesn't override any
Weather.com.
existing conditions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the longer days are in summer.
Yeah,
The
so,
schools aren't really in session.
yeah,
So there aren't.
yeah, that's true, good point, yeah.
Is there room in such an ordinance for ending of sports events plus 1 hour? You know, a reasonable expectation of sunset plus 1 hour to take down, or as a
Good point.
guideline,
That's a good point,
not
too.
an ordinance?
Becomes interpretive to
Yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioner Lane's point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any further questions or comments?
And just a note, I don't know if everyone heard, but this does not override any existing conditional use permit conditions that are on particular fields or activity areas.
I have another proposed change to the ordinance, or to the schools thing. It says lighting shall be, on fields shall be downlit and shall not shine into the neighboring properties, but we've never had anything that said it's okay to have lighting at all on an athletic court. Our current ordinance says lighting is not permitted on athletic courts, period. And we're sticking with that, with the exception of the public schools, which put up lights wherever they want to put them up. So my suggestion would be lighting is not permitted on athletic courts or fields, not permitted, period. Security lighting for special events shall be shielded and downlit to prevent the source of light from being visible on neighboring properties, and shall not be higher than 10 feet. The 10 feet being the current height limit for post lights on entry gates.
Now, this doesn't apply to private property.
No, this is what I'm talking about, school event.
School events, and
Yeah.
and the downlit requirement is part of the existing ordinance.
Existing ordinance,
Correct.
but I didn't think that it was. It was
Yeah, the current one reads, any lighting associated with field or outdoor functions use shall be shielded or downlit so the source of light shall not shine. So we didn't change that at all.
Yeah, but I wanna make sure that the private schools don't think they can light athletic courts, for any reason they want to for a special event. Suppose they think a special event is a football game.
Right.
Are we gonna let them do that?
Only under a special event permit like we may have done recently for Sacred Heart.
Well, but there we go, having the gate, Sacred Heart's a little different, because they're kinda all by themselves out there.
True.
But, Menlo School, for example, would try that, and there would be fair size uproar, I'm afraid.
There would be some commentary, yes, that's for sure. So we didn't recommend any change to that, and this only applies to school, private and public schools within the town. So if you make a modification there, it's something new to the ordinance, but that's pleasure of the commission when you recommend it to the council.
Right. I haven't got any further comments. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, George.
Sure.
Lieutenant Wade, do you have any further comments from you? You came to join us, how say you?
I'm doing well, thank you. You know, the only thing I will add is that I think the spirit of it in reading it was not to make any significant changes, but when we read it prior to, there were, as the city manager said, there were some loopholes, so maybe some, we'll call them parties who were exempt from getting a special events permit. It's kind of a catch-all be-all, so that in the event they don't go through the permit process that they're actually required to, and it does generate a police or public works response, that it would catch it on the tail end. It's sort of like a safety net to make sure that if you're required to get a special events permit, that whether you do it in the beginning or at the end, you'll end up getting one if it requires extensive police services. Now, also keep in mind, as the city manager and I spoke, and the police department is not looking to come out and issue administrative citations for these things. These are, in fact, the majority of these calls are simple Muni Code violations where we'll respond, we'll go out, and we'll say, hey, you know, would you mind turning it down because you're in violation of the noise ordinance? And you know what? Like 99.9% of the time people do. It's rare when we have to go out that we leave and we have to come back again. People are very compliant. So this is one of those where I've had a huge party, valet parking, which is not uncommon. We have that all the time. And if for whatever reason it gets out of control or our cars are parked illegally, then we have no problem going out there, talking to the valet parking folks and saying, hey, look, just make sure the cars are parked legally and we leave. But in the event that we have to come out and we have to do a heck of a lot more than we had originally planned, and we look back and say, you know what, based on everything we're doing for this, we've been out here for a while now, it's the second time we've been out, you probably should have got a special events permit knowing that you might need us to do some of these things, then that's something that we would make a recommendation. But you really have to push pretty hard for anything to happen. It's just a safety net so that in the event if push comes to shove and something needs to be done because you're requiring extensive police services more than the norm, that there's a catch-all for that.
Thank you. Any questions, Lieutenant Wade, anyone?
Where are you on the night of the 27th? No, okay.
All right, anyone else in the audience like to comment on special events ordinance? If not, we'll close the public hearing. Comments from commissioners? Paul?
I would just say that, we're looking at this for the specific things that George and the officer were just talking about. And we need to be careful not to open up a whole can of worms by making too many changes as, to the time of the fields is one and the lighting that you're talking about. I think those aren't necessarily in relation to what we were just talking about as far as triggering the special events permit. So we have to be careful about making too many changes that may be unnecessary.
Okay. Mary Beth?
Well, I'm not in favor of extending the field use time. Other than that, my other comment is about there's a call out that says that real estate open houses aren't considered special events. And yeah, that's true, but it seems odd to me that we call that out, for a commercial industry. And I personally think that would be removed from the ordinance.
Hey, William?
Listening to the tactical and operational responses, it seems like a lot of what may be put on paper is, in the end, the goodwill or lack of goodwill between the officers and whoever is charged with enforcing it. So I'm kind of like, well, I kind of agree with Mary Beth on the issue of 7 p.m., but in terms of other structural changes, it's how you enforce it. We can pass all the ordinances we want, but how do you enforce it? I mean, have we ever gone out and fined anybody for not? No. So,
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I think that the idea of leaving it at 7 o'clock is appropriate, because when I think of an after-school activity, it's going to start when people, try to start at 5:30 or 4:30 or whatever they try to roll it, and 7 o'clock finish with cleanup seems like a reasonable end time for me. Generally, it would be late enough so we can go over, and if somebody were to push the envelope enough times, we just go say, we pushed the envelope twice on this, so don't do it again. So I think that's enough. I think the intent here is good intent, and I think it's giving the city or the town what it needs to do to help itself to remind neighbors to be good neighbors. So that's what I like about it. And in spite of the origin of it, I think it's the right way to go.
Okay. I can live with the 7 o'clock athletic time. It's what's there now, and everything's relatively quiet at the moment along that line, so we usually let it go that way. So we'll change that one. Lisa?
Back to 7 p.m.
Back to
for
7
the
p.m.
outdoor functions.
Right.
are you making a motion, Mr. Chairman?
Well, we can make a motion now, if that's the only change we're gonna make.
I make a motion that we adopt it with the change back to 7 p.m.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Paul seconds. Moved and seconded that we adopt the order, or suggest the ordinance be adopted with the change to closure at 7 o'clock. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you for coming
Thank
out.
you for joining us.
Thanks.
Pleasure.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is special structures permit, Fairview Avenue.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. So tonight you have a,
Please, I can't hear you.
tonight, good evening, can you hear me now? Better? Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
So tonight you have a special structures permit request in front of you at 48 Fairview Avenue to allow a swimming pool within a portion of the front yard setback. An accessory structure, as defined by the town zoning ordinance, would have required the swimming pool to be located 30 feet behind the main residence or 120 feet behind the front property line. The proposal tonight in front of you is requesting to have the swimming pool located 10 feet behind the front residence or 70 feet behind the front property line. The submitted intent of this request is primarily to protect a series of redwood trees that span both the rear and right side property line, some heritage trees, some not. Additionally, an intent of the request is to try to maximize the property's most extent of direct sunlight on a swimming pool in the open locations on the lot. The town arborist, myself, and the property owner's arborist did meet out at the site to assess the proposed location of the pool. At that site inspection, given the assessment of the trees and what was originally proposed, the applicant has since reduced the length of the pool 5 feet back from the rear trees than what was originally proposed. That's what's in front of you tonight. There has been a letter submitted that has been distributed to the commission, members of the public as well, by the right side neighbor at 36 Fairview Avenue. I did speak with them directly as well. They will not be able to attend tonight's meeting, The primary concerns expressed in that letter have to do with noise related to the pool equipment, as well as the placement of the pool itself in the side yard. Subsequent to that letter, the property owner has also made attempts to directly have conversation with that neighbor on these issues. She has submitted a letter of response to the neighbor's letter of concern that also has been distributed to the commission, copies made for the public as well. Following the site inspections, the recommendations of the town arborist, staff is recommending approval of the special structures permit for the reasons as outlined in the staff report, with the conditions as specified in the draft certificate. There is a condition in there that would address the pool equipment needing to mitigate any noise outcome from that so that it complies with the town's requirements. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions the commission may have. We have our arborist here. We have both the property owner and site applicant here as well to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions of staff, anyone?
I have one quick question. I saw the original letter, but I didn't see the neighbor's response, so can you summarize the neighbor's response for me?
The property owner's response?
Right.
Sure.
You said the neighbor responded to the property owner's response, right?
No, the property owner responded to the neighbor's response.
There's been
Yes.
no feedback.
And that's the end of communications that we've been made aware of.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions? Anyone?
Not a staff.
If not, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone in the audience like to be heard in this matter? Is the applicant here?
I'm the applicant or you're the applicant?
On your
So,
behalf.
Carefree
Depends on-
Toland Pool is the applicant, I believe. I'm the property owner. So I have made attempts that, thank you for the commission for taking the time to come to the property and do a site visit. I think that was hopefully useful to you. It was certainly very useful to me because I got a chance to share the site and the matters at hand with you. I did get a chance to speak to the neighbor directly last night. So they are in Southern California. I sent the email, did not hear a response back, but I did put a call into him and spoke with him live. I know that was a request that you had, that we definitely connect. And he was very favorable to all the statements I had made about we are planning to be very neighborly about this. We don't intend to, this is primarily an exercise pool because my husband injured his back 2 years ago and it rendered him incapacitated for a year. We do have 2 small children. They will be using the pool as well. However, we're also very conscious that we don't want to, we don't want to create a situation for them that's uncomfortable. So should any issues arise, I totally open the door that he come to me directly and we are going to resolve this amicably. We have no intention of creating undue stress for them. So that, and he was very appreciative that I reached out to him and hopefully his concerns are alleviated. I mentioned to him that the pool equipment we're using is a very quiet pool equipment and our own bedrooms are above the pool, so we have every intention of also insulating it from, soundproofing it as best we can. And that was also reassuring to him.
Very good. Any questions? Anyone?
Has he sent you a written written G-grade conversation along what you're doing? Go ahead, go for it.
I did not request him to do that. I said, should you have any concerns or questions, please send it to me. I would have appreciated if he had done that, but I have not seen a response. I'm not sure if you have seen anything come through. No.
How long ago did you respond to him?
Last night, I talked to him live.
Right.
And earlier in the day, I sent the email. I had sent a written correspondence to after I realized that the letter has come in. I sent a written correspondence to him, requesting him to contact me by cell phone or telephone. When the planning commissioners came over, they strongly suggested we connect and to resolve this. So we, the 2 of us, walked over to our neighbor's property and caught them, but they were en route to the airport. It was not an appropriate time to talk. They suggested we talk in the afternoon. So, which is when we ended up connecting.
Okay.
Thank you for doing it.
Any further questions? Thank you. Anyone else in the audience desire to be heard on this item? If not, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back.
Actually, I might have a question. Are you with the pool company?
Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask, is now the time to ask a question of the pool equipment
Yes.
is going to be, and I was looking at that,
It's in their bedroom.
that's gonna be on the north side of the pool, between the pool and the fence
Yes,
of
sir.
the neighboring yard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I was just wondering if that is the only spot, or what other options there are to kind of get it away from their property to alleviate maybe some of their concerns for noise.
Well, it certainly could be moved anywhere along that property line. As it sits now, it is 30 feet back from the front of the house. We're not asking that it be included within the special structures permit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's over 10 feet from the side property line.
Right.
But if we move it to the back, it just increases the gas line length, increases the electrical draw that we're gonna need to do. Originally, we had it in, when we first met with Stephanie and with Sally, I had it in the 30-foot setback to be at the corner of the swimming pool at the 20 feet.
Right.
Just because it cuts down the overall utilities and pushes it, further basically away from the back corner where the hot tub is, and then from where the bedroom is.
Mm-hmm.
But being that it's going to be enclosed, matched architecture of the house, the location of it really is.
And the equipment that's going in there, what's your experience with that? Because you were saying it's very quiet.
Oh,
I'm not familiar with pool equipment. So.
Yeah, it's Pentair. They're IntelliFlow pumps. They're the pumps themselves are sealed. It's not a single speed pump where it's all or nothing. The day-to-day operations for the pumps are going to run at a very low RPM. You won't hear the pump itself running. It's quieter than your outdoor exposed air conditioner.
Mm-hmm.
You could have this pump running on its cycle and have it next to an air conditioning unit, and you hear the air conditioning unit over the pump itself.
Is this a chlorine based filtration system?
We're going to be using salt inside of the pool to generate chlorine on a daily basis. And there will be an IntelliChem system which will actually, while the salt is being generated, the electrolysis is driving the pH up. So the IntelliChem system has a pH and the ORP sensor, so the pH as it rises, it will draw from the acid tank and be able to neutralize that electrolysis, keeping your pH where it needs to be.
That's way above my paper.
Yeah.
It's a great system. It's a great system.
I don't know if this is helpful. This was from the PDF that I circulated in that email. It's documentation from the vendor, and they have decibels rating on this device. They say a library is at 30 decibels. This pump is at 45 decibels. The dishwasher is at 60.
All right. Thank you.
No.
Eric?
Nope, I'm fine.
I've got one. Tell me again what the neighbor's response to your explanation of screening and where the pool was going to be. What did they say? They say it was okay, good to go for it?
He did not give any, there were no words like that were used. He said, "Thank you very much, I really appreciate this explanation, that helps." And he said, "If I have any further questions, I will email you." And I heard nothing.
Well, I met with your neighbors on Monday because they said they were going out of town on Tuesday and Wednesday and wouldn't be here. And at that point, they expressed to me that they'd like to have this continued because they would like to really understand what's happening. Now, you've communicated to them, albeit late, that should have been done a long time ago, or we wouldn't be in this fix right now.
My misunderstanding on that front was that I thought we all get communicated, and this was my misunderstanding. I thought we all get communicated or all of the neighbors get communicated at the same time. I didn't realize that it's available. And you had mentioned this; it just slipped my mind completely. So.
Well, the town notices neighbors within 500 feet of an event like this, and it's up to the neighbors to say something about it. And we've had numerous special structures permits and so forth recently with very little or none no input from neighbors. This is the first one we've had any kind of a question from the neighbor. So I'm a little reluctant to go forward right now until we have a clear understanding of what their position really is.
Mr. Chairman,
William?
I sense the same thing you do, perhaps as a compromise, which is if you could get something written vis-a-vis your discussion last night, whereby they are satisfied with your explanation of your yesterday email to them and concur on those points, I don't know what we do procedurally, but I would feel much more comfortable.
So is there a approval contingent on?
We can do that, I think. We need to talk to council about that. So
Do you want-
What was the last part?
Approve with a condition that a letter come in.
The condition doesn't work for us as well as just continuing it to the next meeting to give time for them to
Right.
get that correspondence and for any follow-up to occur. It's unclear whether that would come in, and so making that a condition leaves an ambiguity that could be difficult to resolve. For example, condition upon that, what if they then didn't get that from the neighbor? So
Then just take it up at the next meeting.
well, I think for us, it would have to be put back on the agenda again. I think it might make more practical sense. I think Lisa concurs if you just continue it to the next regularly scheduled meeting, give a little time for the correspondence to take place, as versus making
Certainly
it a
cleaner
condition.
that way, isn't it?
It just
So it's
leaves
cleaner
for,
that way, but her husband.
But it's a delay.
It's a month delay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
are we gonna close the public hearing? Because I have questions of the,
Well, we'll probably best reopen the public hearing because I think I closed it once. So we'll reopen the public hearing. Go ahead.
Okay. My understanding is that the reason we're coming to the commission is because we're requesting a variance on where the start of the pool occurs, not the fact the pool is on the side yard. They are objecting to the pool being on the side yard. I believe as an Atherton resident, I have a right to put a pool on my side yard if it's within code. And I do not believe that their objection is about the variance itself. It's actually about the position of the pool on the side yard. So if,
There's also noise.
yeah.
the noise to the pool, I don't believe it's the pool. The pool equipment itself is within code. It's not in the variance.
But this is exactly what could have been avoided had you discussed this with this neighbor at a much earlier time. We wouldn't be in this mess right now. So I don't know what to do. He's still out there with.
Can I call him right now and see if he's available for comment?
Okay, when you're ready to close the public hearing, I have something to say, but I didn't wanna do it.
Pardon me?
Whenever we're ready to do the public, close the public hearing, I wanna go back, I wanna sort of discuss some aspects of it from the ordinance standpoint. So whenever the public is,
Well, it still goes back to my point that you should have been discussing this with the neighbor to try and get somebody who's in the Los Angeles area on the phone to solve a problem this afternoon doesn't sit well, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, we ought to just go on. If we're gonna continue it, so be it, we'll continue the thing.
That would be unfortunate.
just so I understand, I don't have an agreement with this one.
so I've got a comment, but
Excuse me, public hearing
it
still
wasn't
open.
attached.
Any further
Is
comments?
there anything
anyone?
else that you would like to comment
Site
on?
plan.
I concur with everything that you said, that
I mean, we're-
agreement, the disagreement.
Really, they would like us to put it in the backyard. The backyard has redwood trees that have sprawling and shallow roots.
That's why we visit the property, so we
Yeah.
can see that as well.
And,
The neighbor's next to the pool, right? Yeah.
and I
This doesn't
believe,
affect the neighbor. Yeah, but there's
Wait a
no
minute.
issue. If the pool is moved back 20 feet,
Yes,
it's still gonna affect the neighbor.
but it's still the same neighbor.
Where are you,
This
staff?
is a different neighbor. Really, I just wanna make sure, I did not get a copy of the site plan, so I wanna make sure I understood
She
the
just wanted to
issue.
understand the relationship with the neighbor.
Yes, same neighbor, gotcha.
Okay. Okay, any further
so
questions?
the option to put the pool on the backyard is really not an option for us given the redwoods are there. So we're dealing with the side yard as a pool anyhow. Now, the question at hand is the variance, I believe,
No, it's
not
not a
about.
variance. It's not a variance. It's a special structures permit. This isn't a variance.
A
It'd be
special
much
structure
different-
permit.
This would be much different if this was a variance. The requirements to approve a variance are entirely different than what we're doing this evening.
Much harder.
Entirely different, much stronger, much more difficult.
So,
Again, we still don't know the position of your neighbor. I think we know what it'll be, because you provided a very clear explanation of what your plans are. It's the problem is he hasn't responded, and we need to get that response. It's I think exactly where we are.
If I may, just
Yes,
if I
please.
can help clarify for the applicant. So if you look at the staff report and the way it's structured, they always give the required findings that the planning commission is required by law to make. So for example here, the first one is they have to make a finding that the proposed building or structure will not negatively impact neighboring properties with respect to privacy and view. Then they talk about landscape height and screening. So I understand your point that you're talking about you have a right to put it within the side yard setback. There's side yard setback within that. And so you say you meet that, so it's great. But it's the same neighbor all the way across that property. And I think what the planning commission is concerned about is they do a great job of really paying attention to neighbors and making sure that these things are fully vetted before they grant such a permit. And since it's the same neighbor that's affected all the way along there, and they haven't fully vetted that with the neighbor, that communication might need more time to develop. And so yes, you do have a right, and I understand that part of it is conforming, but to the extent that it's not, and it is the neighbor on that side that's affected, they may not be able to make the necessary legal findings that I need them to make before they can approve it.
so is it my understanding that if the special structure permit request is at this table because we're encroaching by 20 feet, that we wouldn't be here if we were not doing that?
Yes,
right?
we would then-
So we would still be able to build a side yard pool that they may still object to, but it would not be an issue. Is that correct?
If you conform to the code.
If we conform to the code,
then
it would not be an
absolutely.
issue.
No.
So the matter is at hand right now is just a 20-foot encroachment that now allows them to object to a pool's existence on the side yard.
Yeah.
Frankly, I think they're okay with it right now after my conversation last night, which is why I believe that if I could get them on the phone, they could concur with that. And a continuance on this matter by a month would just push out the entire pool structure by a month, which is fairly significant.
So,
But we're not the ones who didn't communicate with the neighbors.
I understand, and I tried to rectify that as best I could. They were not necessarily forthcoming by, when I sent them a correspondence on Saturday, they were not forthcoming to reach out to me. I reached out to them immediately after our meeting and that afternoon.
Here's the thing, all right, so there's a couple choices that the planning commission has. And this would be the same opportunity we'd offer anyone if you were the neighbor next to the pool. Is that if we do due diligence to do everything we can, your neighbor could come next week or next month and say, absolutely, I don't like the pool the way it is. And we will hear them, all right? And then we will bring it back here and make a decision on it, like we do all the time. A lot of times people don't agree, right? But to the degree that we don't do a little bit more effort to make sure that they get heard, then that's looking like we didn't want to hear them, all right? Just like we would for any other neighbor, including you. So the intent here is to we're not making a decision on the pool, right, by continuing. We're offering the same type of opportunity for inclusion that we would for any neighbor in the community, which helps make it so that people feel like they're heard. All right, if they come here, we still would make a decision based on the facts. All right, the facts is one neighbor doesn't like it, the other neighbor says I want it, and it's a 20-foot modification to code. All right, the board can make that decision. Right. Right now, if we do that, we are basically saying, sorry you couldn't be here, sorry we don't know exactly what you're thinking, but we're going to move ahead. We could do that too, but it hasn't been the way we've approached the approach to making sure the neighbors feel included. When that happens, you're more likely to get a situation where the person's going to want to appeal it, and you're going to get extended out longer. All right. So as the chairman is bringing up, to the degree that this sort of ping pong back and forth for a while, and we're here, there's a couple of ways that we could go, and frankly, the continuance is the shortest way for you to get with your answer with the most success. right? And I would estimate that what you're gonna hear is probably what you're hearing. Either they're satisfied that you've approached it in a way that they believe will be worthwhile, or they're gonna react to the idea that, you know, once the pool's in there, we don't know what you're gonna do with the house. You might sell it, and then 75 kids move in, and then I'm gonna listen to that all day. So they still get to do that. So I think, you know, what I would be saying is, for everyone's good intent and good practice, we would continue it in spite of the fact that it may be a difficulty for the project, to the idea that you're actually going to get your project done faster.
I guess a question
Thank you, Eric.
for the planning commissioner board is that, could we actually move forward excavating a pool that is not encroached 20 feet and then come back and request for next month meeting to get the extra 20 feet?
They can certainly submit plans to planning and building for a permit with a compliant pool, begin construction on that, and then request a modification to those from the planning commission. I would not recommend it,
Yeah, it's probably more
but
expensive
you
to do
could
that.
certainly do that.
That's a new charge, right?
So there is a way to start, but it may be
There's a way
more
to
expensive.
start, is what I'm saying.
There may be a way to start, but it may
Okay.
be more expensive, thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it.
The expense is permitting fees, is
It
that
would
what
be
the expense
permitting.
is? Okay.
Because if you came back with revisions, that would be
Yeah.
stop the clock, and both planning and building would have to re-review based on the new concept.
Would you be favorable for me trying to reach them right now and seeing if I could get them on?
The problem that I have with it is that everything has to be on the record, and in order to have it be on the record, they need to be here or to have submitted a letter. We don't regularly accept phone calls.
Can I ask him to send an email? No?
It's not
You
usually.
can ask them, and then we still have to make the determination what we
Okay.
do the rest of this meeting.
Well, we'll even see if I can even reach him. I mean, there's a lot of ifs, but
I make a motion this issue be continued to the next meeting.
Motion been made to continue to our next regular meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Paul seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion's carried. Is there a nay? None? 5-0. Motion is made and carried. The item will be continued to our next regular meeting. Thank you. All right, our next item on our agenda is tree removal at 86 Alejandra. Is that been?
That was taken off.
Yeah, the
Is that-
property owner requested this item be continued to the next meeting. They may need some additional time, but I would like to request that the planning commission formally continue it to the next meeting.
Okay, is there-
If we need additional time, we'll renotice it.
Is there a motion then to continue 86 Alejandra to our next regular meeting?
So this, yeah, all
So
second,
moved.
Paul moves and William seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion is carried. The item is continued to our next regular meeting. The next item on our agenda, 81 Fair Oaks Lane, for a variance.
Thank you, commissioners. So the request before you tonight is for a 91 square foot ground floor addition that is requesting a variance to encroach within the required side yard setback at 81 Fair Oaks Lane. The addition, as mentioned, is a first floor addition. It's bumping out an existing powder room and creating a new mudroom and entry to the house. The underlying basis intent of the variance primarily is due to the lot configuration. This property is a corner lot, has frontages both on Fair Oaks as well as Fair Oaks Lane cul-de-sac. The property line that faces Fair Oaks Lane cul-de-sac is what staff is finding to be relatively excessive to other corner properties. Over 62% of this overall property boundary fronts public right-of-way, both on Fair Oaks and Fair Oaks Lane cul-de-sac. Additionally, that property line that fronts the cul-de-sac portion of Fair Oaks Lane, it's not strictly rectangular in shape, as we find the majority of lots within this neighborhood. It has excessive curvature that goes inward towards the property. That fact, combined with the existing situation of location of structure on the house, a detached garage in the rear, as well as a swimming pool, those factors combined together minimize the actual allowable buildable area of this property. The area of the addition that's requesting the variance would be screened from the public right-of-way with existing vegetation and fencing that the property currently has. So with that, there have been no public comment that has been received by staff on this project. With that, based on the findings and reasons as outlined in the staff report, staff's recommending approval of the variance per the certificate and conditions as specified in the report. Happy to answer any questions the commission may have. I believe the property owner is here as well.
Thank you. Any questions of staff, anyone? If not, we'll open the public hearing for 81 Fair Oaks Lane. Applicant here, comment?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I've never done this before.
Long commute.
We just want to add a small mud room, laundry room, expand. Our laundry room is a closet off the end of the kitchen, and we just want to make it more of a proper functional space. And as Stephanie pointed out, the curvature of the cul-de-sac makes it really challenging for us. And we sent out letters to all of our neighbors announcing our plans and inviting conversation and addressing any concerns, and we didn't hear from any of our neighbors. Our most adjacent neighbor, who would be at this end corner of the house and most impacted, our driveways are parallel and their house is essentially kind of a flag lot, so we're nowhere near any of our neighbors. I don't think they'd be affected by this, and as was pointed out, we have a fence, 6-foot-high fence with vegetation, and yeah, that's just hopeful to add the 90 square feet.
Any questions? Anyone? I visited the property on Tuesday. Very interesting property, a very peculiar property. You've done very nicely with it so far. We'll see what happens.
Thank you.
Have you had any comments, written comments at all from your neighbors?
None, and
None.
we sent out letters to every neighbor on the cul-de-sac, even the neighbors across the way. There was concern about how it would look. Our plan is, it's a ranch-style home. We would like to keep it essentially in that same sort of style. We're not going to do anything extreme or change the facade of the home. So we've heard nothing from our neighbors.
Thank you.
And we've seen them since we sent out the letter, and we're just,
They're not avoiding you.
they're not avoiding us or saying it's dirty looks or anything. Yeah,
Schedules.
it's fine. Yeah,
Any questions of the applicant, anyone? Not, thank you very much.
thank you.
We'll close the public hearing. Comments from commissioners? William?
I visited the site, we walked around, we looked at the falling fence, we looked at the plans, and then we looked at the plans again, and we called the architect, and William finally understood the plans, thank you very much. And it's essentially a little thing hung on the back end that doesn't have bulk, doesn't, I doubt if it would be seen by a neighbor as being intrusive visually on their visual right of way. So I did my due diligence, got no problem with it.
Eric?
I went to the site, this looks pretty straightforward to me, and I appreciate the diligence you had in your neighborhood outreach. So I'm fine with it.
Mary Beth?
I visited the site, and I agree that it's a small addition. My only concern is the fact that the Planning Commission has turned down 2 other Fair Oaks
Thought about that, yeah.
Fair Oaks residents who wanted to do the same, although they were both a little larger than
Good deal.
81
Yeah.
square feet. And so I'm kind of uncertain as to how appropriate it is for us to approve it. However, I did vote for the last one on Fair Oaks. I voted for it because I thought that going out was a better solution than going up, and with adding privacy issues to the neighbors. So I'm kind of uncertain as to how we can really say that this property can have the variance where other properties can't.
Yeah, I looked at that too, because I was thinking exactly the same thing. And where I came out was the shape of this property and the impact that the curve had on this property was significantly different than the other properties we had looked at, because the other properties were just rectangular square properties, and they were just very, very normal. And so even in those hearings, I was going, so what is so specific about this property that's so different than a normal property? And there was no answer on that. This one came with an answer, and that's why I'm okay with it.
Paul?
No comments.
Very good. Okay, if that's the case, is there a motion then, please?
I'll move that the planning commission approve the variance at 81 Fairwoods Lane based on the findings and for the reasons enumerated in the staff report, subject to the conditions listed in the draft variance certificate to allow a 91 square foot ground floor addition to be constructed closer than is allowed to a side property line.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
William seconds.
Okay.
Thank you. Paul moves and William seconds. To approve the variance. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Vote. The variance is approved.
Yeah, I wanted to abstain.
Oh, you want, okay. Mary Beth,
I feel,
Mary Beth abstains, very
Yeah.
good, okay. Still approved. Again, if you disagree with our decision this evening, you can appeal to the council within 10 days.
You got to feel to yourself.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is discussion of section 1744 basements.
Thank you. At your last meeting, you requested staff come up with some suggested revisions to the basement regulations, and I'm really open to whatever direction you want to provide staff. A couple of the items, though, that seem pretty routine when we reviewed the last few special structure permit for basement under accessory structures, when there's no light well associated with it, the basement does not have any habitable space. That seemed to be rather routine, and I think the commission was comfortable supporting those basement under accessory building. And again, the basement under accessory building is limited to the footprint, so they do not have the ability to extend. So that's something, if you wanted to make a modification, you could put that under staff authority and not require the special structure permit. And then the other item was possibly have a modification. A few of the items we saw were rather minor extensions beyond the footprint for the main dwelling. I'd rather not specify that it has to be under a patio area, because then I feel like it almost forces somebody to design with a patio area.
Right.
And I'd rather just have some objective criteria that you're comfortable with, more of it as square footage. I was thinking of a percent, but then that could get large. So, maybe 100 square feet in total, 100 square feet, 10 by 10 area, or 200 square feet. That could maybe be at a staff level. So if there's a minor extension, some little bump out, then we can handle that at staff level. Anything larger than that would come forward to the commission. And then the other area I know you talked about, we really haven't seen anyone kind of build out that 130%. I think most of them are smaller extensions. I've got one that wants to come next month, and I don't know the exact square footage, but it's one of the larger extensions I've seen, and I warned them that commission may not be too excited about it. But you could certainly lower that threshold. The 130 was kind of a negotiated item that was talked about at the city council meeting. You could lower it, you could modify it.
It was a big thrash. It really was, to get that 130%.
Yeah.
It was a big one.
As opposed to 150 or what?
But I guess my concern is we're putting it.
It grew. It was about 110, and then went to 150, and then it came back to 130.
I remember it was 113.
But we're also putting in
Lots
a
of people
threshold
waiting.
that I don't think the commission is comfortable approving. Based on feedback I've heard from you on items that you've reviewed, I'd be very concerned bringing forward a project that was at 130% of the first floor. So if it's not something you're comfortable with, maybe we just change the ordinance.
But it can be done, and if a contractor or a builder wanted to do 130%, we said no, they could very well appeal to the council, right back. Because it's there. They can get
It is there, yes. I just feel that, we'd rather take in your input into the code than, because the architect's gonna look at it and say, well, it says I can do it, I'm gonna max it out and come forward, and then what's your basis for the denial? It makes it a little more difficult for you, I think. Because there's not a lot of basis in there to deny it, really.
Yes. Start with it.
Yeah. So that's my concern.
When you say approve at the staff level, that says it's not a special structures permit.
Yeah, and that's some direction I thought I got at the last meeting is, you know,
Right,
some of
no,
these seem routine,
I
but
just
yes.
clarified for my own.
Yes, you're correct. No special structure
And so there
permit.
wouldn't be a special structures permit fee.
Correct. No hearing, no fee.
How are we gonna pay you?
We charge a
That's exactly
planning
what I was
review
getting
fee. There is a planning review fee that's required.
Okay.
But not nearly the size of the special structures permit.
Do you know what it is for accessory building? Like $1,000?
About $1,100.
It's about half. But, oh, by the way, they still have to pay that even though they get the special structure permit, because they still need to review the building,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, so they pay 2 fees for planning, if they come forward. Don't worry about the budget, we'll get
Yeah.
it worked out. I mean, because we do the cost analysis and
That's
get
how
cost
you get the
recovery.
amount in the first place.
But yeah.
So it's supposed to be less work.
Mhm.
Comments from commissioners? Want to start, Eric?
I like the notion of dropping it, some down to some square footage. I would go for 100 square feet and let that be staff discretion.
Yeah, my thing on, I don't know what the threshold is on the 130. 130 sounds like a lot to me,
Yeah.
particularly when you're talking
Yeah,
about
it
5,000
seems
square foot
ridiculous.
footprint above it, so.
Right.
I mean, that's a whole lot. Now, if it were conditional, like, okay, if you go 1 story, I'll give you 130%.
Oh, yeah.
But if you go 2 stories and that, it's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
I mean, so it's you know,
It
so-
wasn't the commission that bumped it up.
Yeah,
No, it was not.
yeah. Well,
It was at the council level.
and for what, for just, what was the criteria that was used for the 130 other than that it's been
Well, it went
negotiated?
back and forth, as I recall, from about 110 to 150, and then it was,
But was
threw the
it,
dart at the wall and came out 130.
yeah, so.
It was a compromise.
I know, but what was the thinking behind the 150, for example? What was it? Was it because we think that we want bigger basements in town, or what?
Well, it was a pullback from, you could have a basement pretty much anywhere, to,
Oh.
well, just under the footprint,
It
well,
ac- it
okay,
actually-
you can have a little
It
exception.
actually started, the whole thing started with a proposal over on the Gates area, where he wanted to put a basement under the whole property,
Wall to wall,
wall-to-wall basement.
property line. to
And
property
everybody said no, and they had a moratorium or something or other on that.
Well, not so
And
much.
that got the whole basement thing.
Wow.
Okay, all right, well, I would be fine if we wanted to recommend lower than 130, so, but, and
I'm sorry, Eric, what was
I
that?
would be fine, I would be fine if we want to recommend below 130.
Yes.
And I would be fine if we gave staff the ability to have a discretionary amount of square feet up to, I would agree, to up to 200 square
Both of
feet.
those.
Yeah,
Yes, I agree with
yeah.
that.
Yeah, so that would smooth out the planning process for an applicant,
Mhm.
and it would make it so that we didn't get to do patio underneath all the time. Although we really appreciate the practice you've given us lately.
Busy.
It'll be fine with me.
I think that's fine, except how do we decide what kind of a number to use for 130? Throw another dart,
No, I
110%?
Well-
Don't you think there's some risk that there'll be some blowback from the council?
Oh, I'm sure there'd be a pullback from somebody, yeah.
We can do maybe a survey of all the
Yeah.
basements that have come forward over
Yeah.
the last 2 years or
Yeah.
3 years even maybe,
3
to
years.
see kind of what percent they've been coming at, and then I'll look at the one I've got
Does
interested
Woodside-
right now. and
Does
see-
Woodside have an ordinance, or does anybody
Yeah, I
have a
was gonna
benchmark?
suggest,
Yeah.
can you do,
Every jurisdiction's
we can
unique, but
check.
we could look at some adjacent
well,
jurisdictions.
we're only as good as Woodside.
Well, we usually look at Woodside, Portola Valley, and Hillsborough,
Yeah,
Los Altos Hills.
Hillsborough. See what they do.
Yeah, we can check with those.
Sure.
Okay.
It just seems like if we had a criteria that said, you know what, ours is 130 and everybody else is sitting at 125, at least it moves it, gives the criteria to move
Right,
to
kind of a
125.
So
ballpark, yeah.
we'll compare with other
Agreed.
jurisdictions, and I'll try to do a little summary of what
Yeah.
you've seen recently.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
Thank you.
the surrounding, these other jurisdictions are not mostly flat like
Right.
we are.
Yeah, that's true. Well, so I don't mind using
Yeah,
the
true.
there.
You wanna go forward with those?
And then, do you want me to come back with an ordinance for your review at the next meeting in that format, public hearing, or you still want to kick it around a little bit?
No, let's go and see what a draft ordinance looks like.
Okay.
Get the show on the road.
That would, draft ordinance mean that we could take action on it at the
You
next meeting?
can, or
Yeah.
you can continue if
Right.
you want.
Okay.
It's your pleasure.
Eric said 200, I said 100.
Yeah, whatever you want.
Oh,
Somewhere in there.
We need,
well, I'll put it in a number, it sounds like it's 125.
Well, look at,
How about 130?
look at what we've been
Maybe
approving
more
recently.
100 than 200.
Yeah.
You look at
Yeah,
what-
we'll look at that, and then we'll put a number, and then you can modify that at the meeting if you need
Yeah,
to.
I think the last patio was like
Sounds good.
15 by 15 or 10 by 20.
Right. Yeah, and I'm gonna say in total, right,
Yeah,
all the
right.
extensions,
Yeah.
you can't do 100 square feet
Right.
there, 100 square feet
Right,
there.
right,
It's
right.
gotta
A
be-
nickel and
Right.
diamond.
But you could do a little 20 over here and a little 30 over there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good,
Good enough
great
direction.
direction, I
That's-
appreciate
yeah,
it.
no, that's
All right,
steps
the
in
next
the right
item on our
direction.
agenda is
Very right.
commissioners' reports. Anyone?
I've actually got something this time. Yeah. So I never have a commissioner's report, but I went to the traffic planning, the area traffic planning session.
On
at the-
Monday night, the 16th?
Yeah.
How was that?
It was outstanding. It was outstanding.
I missed it.
It was and so basically it's the the mayors of the towns nearby towns were there, and the San Francisco based planning representative was there, and they done a really good presentation on the whole notion of first of all, it started by this the initiative called the Grand Boulevard Initiative,
Right.
GBI, and which is basically the 43 miles. And in case you didn't know, it's 43 miles of Oakland Real. So I learned all kinds of stats from it. But there's a 59-member task force from the various city councils from Daly City to San Jose, and they came together and basically said, so this is a major arterial, and we're affecting each other, and we ought to think about what we're doing on that in some kind of coordinated way, because we can. First of all, it has spillover effect if we do the wrong thing, because everybody runs down Middlefield Road or maybe De La Pulgas or whatever parallel there would be. And it also allows us to think differently about the experience on El Camino Real, which is, depending on if you're going by certain areas of Redwood City, and so there's a sort of a regional planning approach to the method around that. And there were all kinds of discussions. From the consultant who presented was talking about methods of actually making traffic better by doing counterintuitive things. So up until 2 years ago, the planning ordinances or the guidelines for all roads were the same. So that basically the roads, highways had the same sort of recommendations as a neighborhood street. So on highways you say don't have trees because there are objects that are going to hurt people, and have wide lanes and things like that. 2 years ago they came up with new regulations around that, realizing that if you narrow the lanes and bring in a little bit in terms of tree and effect and sort of ambiance on a street, it slows down traffic. Fewer pedestrians get hurt. And we also talked specifically about one section of El Camino Real that's wider with nothing on it, and that happens to be the section called Atherton.
Yeah.
And the planning planning representative actually mentioned the fact that when he used to live down here rather than San Francisco, he would think about getting to the point in Atherton where he could finally drive. So there was a whole discussion about how thoroughly this was, and what that would mean for our recommendations in terms of what to do with our strip of it, and what kind of experiences that are being created. So how about if I send the notes that I took? They're cryptic notes, but there's for me it's there's probably 3 pages of notes that I was taking on it. And I don't know if the presentation is available. Do you know if they?
I'll need to find out.
If you can find out the slides and get it to us, that'd be better than my notes, frankly,
Okay.
because my notes just I wasn't sure if the slides would be available. But it was a very informative thing, and it's frankly it's the thing I got on the planning commission about, because we can do all the tennis courts and basements that we want, but the experience of Atherton is going to be more affected by what happens on the traffic into us and the traffic out of us than anything else. And so this was like right when my sweet spot of like, hey, let's talk about regional planning. And so it was a very very good session. It went longer than planned. People stayed longer than planned. I mean, it was attended by planning commissioners and city council people and staff and consultants and neighbors, and it was a really really good thing. That's my report.
Good, very good. Thank you, Eric. Anyone else?
I have a short report. Transportation Committee, one of the committee members suggested that we have right turn only lanes on Elena and Emily onto Valparaiso from Sacred Heart School.
Just get them out of town, you mean?
And seeing as we've just relieved the school from the obligation of doing that, it seemed a little, yeah.
Yeah, they're
adequacy of their environmental impact report
On,
on
Electrification.
electrification.
yes.
Yep.
And the mayor forwarded to me a email to respond to a lecturer at Stanford in which I would describe as tack and opine memo. And he claimed that Atherton was the only town on the peninsula that's holding up the electrification, that we are stubborn and et cetera, which is fine. I sent him, and we are totally negative. I sent him a copy of a July 2010 and then an August 2010 PowerPoint presentation I made to the Rail Committee. You're old enough to remember that, which Caltrain talked about positive approaches to electrification. This whole thing with catenaries is been off the table in Europe for 15, 20 years. They use something called diesel electric motorized units. And the other presentation was about how to get Caltrain to be more efficiently run in several of our rail fronts. And then he kind of calmed down and he said, well, you know, Caltrain electrification has nothing to do with high-speed rail. To which I sent him a recent presentation by the director of Northern California for the California High-Speed Rail Authority. And he starts the speech by saying the first two steps in high-speed rail in Northern California are the Transbay Terminal. And you know, the guy hasn't responded again. But there, I did insult him by starting I was walking down the street thumbing, and I said, you know, I don't know who you are, and as you guys know, this is my 59th month in this fight, and we know that the authority pays off people to attack. Oh yeah.
That last Dale County course didn't really work, did it? Yeah.
And they also pay off bloggers.
I'm sorry?
Bloggers.
Yeah, well, that,
Yeah. So, you know, I said, well, who are you? And then he really came at me. Your whole objective's been to keep it away from 151 Laurel Street. And I said, you know, we're not gonna, he wanted to meet. I said, there's no use meeting if you're in personal attacks. So it was quite an interesting set to dust up, I think the Brits would say.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, we get them all the time. We are on the trial, we have submitted, the judge ruled that only documents up to April the 11th, 2014 are permitted. And that he will review their relevance for preparing the briefs by ourselves and the Attorney General. Attorney General submitted about 200 documents. Our attorney, Stu Flashman, who you guys know, told the Attorney General a month or so ago, look, we are now close to 400. It's actually 418 documents. And the Attorney General says, doesn't matter, they're all inadmissible. This is the game we play with, which is their whole thing is to spend the federal money. There's nothing to do about it. It's spending federal money. And so their whole strategy is stall the lawsuits and keep spending. Stall the lawsuits and keep spending. Yeah. So Stu was, well, I guess we take the gloves off now. And we can't act in a civil manner towards them. We have them cold to rights thanks to months of work by Paul Jones, who many of you know, on the 2-hour, 40-minute issue, and thanks to myself and my colleagues on the issue of operating subsidy. And then the slam dunk that we go to court with probably in July is that our own good senator, Semidian, got the high-speed rail to shift to what they call the blended plan. Oh, folks, that wasn't in the ballot.
Right.
That violates the ballot, so that's a legal issue. So all we have to do is win on one of those, and the project should be halted. But as I have learned, Sacramento obeys laws when it's convenient to them. That's a terrible thing to learn, and they just keep going.
Good, thank you, William. Staff reports in?
The city council at the last meeting did approve the housing element, the general plan amendment to adopt the housing element, authorized its transmittal to the state, and it has been transmitted, so I'll get you a copy of that transmittal letter. And then the council also approved the tentative parcel map at 49 Tuscaloosa that you reviewed at your previous meeting. I think that's about it of interest.
A question for staff. Any new on Cartan Field at all? Still hanging back? Nothing at all?
Menlo College is talking about making an application for amending the use permit to allow Sunday games. And we're getting some questions at Cartan Field about our setbacks for athletic structures, because they're looking to push more closer to El Camino, but our setbacks indicate that an accessory structure in the PFS is considered a main building for setback purposes. So we're kind of talking about, what can we do there? And they don't want to get an ordinance amendment. I think it's reasonable when it's adjacent to a street, not a private property owner, so they haven't finalized the plan, and it's just been very recent conversations,
Sunday.
not much. Menlo College.
Be interesting, okay. Next question, what's doing with the EIR?
We gave back the final comments, so I should have that document available to release shortly. I talked to the city manager about the schedule of moving it forward, and we're interested in having a meeting at the CCAC to review the draft EIR with the public, receive public comments. And that's not where, we do a lot of response. It's more, here's the document, what are your comments? Great, now we'll work on the responses. And then so that would be open to the public. And then the consultant would prepare a response to comments, and that becomes your final EIR, and that would be reviewed by Planning Commission. Maybe
When would you do that with the CCAC?
we could do it at your April meeting.
It's coming up?
Yes.
Okay.
Or,
Jennifer, a
I don't have my
question.
calendar in front of me, maybe May.
Paul and I are both on the CCAC. If we sit in that particular session, are we in a conflict of interest situation when it comes to the Planning Commission?
I think it's okay if you don't participate, if you just sit
That's no fun.
and talk. I know. I'm okay with that. I think the problem becomes when you have a back and forth and start having ideas. So I think we generally say it's okay to go. It's just our preference is if you just observe.
All right. Anything further on staff reports?
Well, to finalize that, we're looking at bringing the final EIR to City Council in September, since they're probably going to
September.
Well, they're looking to cancel the August meeting.
Happy days.
And is that good?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you were concerned it was too far out.
He's going.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, you're funny.
Well, which year?
I'm safe.
This year.
Okay.
The city clerk has advertised for 2 commission vacancies. So
Pardon me?
The city clerk has advertised to fill some commission vacancies.
Oh, she has?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good.
What?
So if anybody has any friends, professional
William.
colleagues.
Okay.
His term is up.
Okay.
He can go again if he's
Right.
still a resident, but I'm turned out because I've been here 8 years.
Really?
Yeah. Second series.
Oh, can we nominate you without?
Refuse.
He's got to step down for a week and then we can.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything else? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, it was so much fun.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.